So, Brett Marshall, welcome. And we're here again after having had a chat about metrics.
Yeah.
We're going to move on to sort of a progression of metrics, which is, I guess, in a way, what they're measuring. What was the topic you were thinking of today then?
Well, I think let's start with the number one metric we talked about last time, which was generating more leads. Or maybe today we call it simply, how can I get more customers? And I think this is a great opportunity to actually talk to you, Rob. With your business Glued, you're the marketing experts, and indeed, how you get more customers is down to your marketing. And I think, just for some perspective today, we're not going to be talking about the kind of companies who can afford to spend a lot of money on TV campaigns, radio campaigns, press ads. We're going to talk more about probably as a smaller business.
Mm-hmm.
What are the cost-effective measures that you would recommend you can take to market your business and get more customers that actually isn't going to cost you a lot of money either. From your point of view, if we take a step back from that, what would you recommend the first step should be to a small business owner who's probably launched a business, maybe not been going too long, and how they, let's say, position their business? What do they need to do?
Yeah, and it's very tempting, I think, to dive straight in and just start promoting. But you're dead right, Brett, at what you've hinted at, which is, I think it's really important to understand what you're offering.
Yeah.
So and not just simply the detail of what you're offering, but also where's the valuable difference in what you're offering, or what other people call unique selling proposition.
Yeah.
So it's important to try and understand what your potential customer will see as more attractive to buy into than they might do with a competitor of yours.
Yeah.
So that's the critical thing about a unique selling proposition. And then we touch on another thing there, which is your customer. I think another important aspect before getting on with any marketing. So if you like, we've dealt with the message in terms of unique selling proposition. But what about who you're targeting? Who do you need to try and persuade and influence and make aware of what you've got to offer? And that's about identifying your ideal customer. Many people today talk about things like client or customer avatars. So you kind of create a picture of your ideal customer. You maybe even give them a name.
Yeah.
And maybe you look at some of their personal interests and habits and some of their personality maybe. And you would also do demographic things like age group, gender. For instance, Glued, we discovered over some years that actually we tend to work very well with women. So one of our targets is, rather than everybody, it'll be women.
Okay.
And so you put together this avatar, and then you've got the beginnings of, okay, well, where do they gather? Where do they look at stuff? Where do they share stuff in the business world? And that'll start to give you a clue about where to promote and advertise and network and so forth.
Yeah.
So I guess that was the sort of thing you were looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. I just say to people sometimes, if your ideal customer was to walk through the door, what would he, she, they look like? Everything you've just said. And then once you're very clear about what your business offering is and who you want to target, then the approach, as you say, who are those people? Where do they go? What do they read? What do they look at? How can I communicate to them? And I guess now we can talk about perhaps the best ways of doing that. So I would say in this day and age, the probably two crucial things you have to have is website and social media.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that in terms of where would you, if you were advising a client as you do, to go about those, and how far should they go? Should they spend loads of money? What's the best way of just getting yourself set up with, if you say website first, what would you advise people to do with that?
Well, I think the first thing to have in mind when you're thinking about putting a website together is, to be fair, for some businesses, maybe a Facebook entry is going to be enough. But let's assume it's a website. The website's going to be needed. Perhaps it's service business to business offering. You need the credibility of a website because your customers are likely to, maybe when they've met you or come across you at some point, go and search online. So a website's going to be the answer. I think the first consideration is don't expect to get your website perfect first time. So don't spend lavish time on perfecting all the content and the layout and only then post to broadcast it, open it up to the public, because actually you probably will never get to a point where it's perfect. We would talk about put together some content that's kind of like a minimum viable product that you can make live and share and get feedback on and evolve. And actually the search engines like that evolving thing, that adding content. It'll make you higher in the rankings when you're searched for. So that's one of the first things to be aware of. And I think that also helps us understand that in the first instance, you don't have to have loads of content up there. There are many instances when we're working with a client where we'll say, okay, we'll get on with developing this minimum viable product that's got maybe 6, 7, 8 pages in it, but that's going to take us quite a few weeks. In the meantime, let's put a page up that is simply the facts about your business and maybe a single strapline about your unique selling proposition, and of course contact details, call to action, click here for more information, which auto loads an email. That's probably the best advice, I think, to begin with. And then on social media, the material you put together for your website, the look and feel you develop for that, really needs to be reflected in the look and feel of your social media pages.
Yeah.
So if you're setting up company pages as against personal pages, that's in a way easier to do. So the backgrounds that you use for the graphics on social media and the messages that you have within those reflect what you've put in your website. Use your unique selling proposition. And the key thing with social media, we've discovered a social media company page, is that you won't get much reach from the company page on its own. So the notion is to post from the company page, but repost from your personal page, thereby engaging your far wider network and, as it were, loaning that audience to your company page.
And typically, I agree with what you said earlier, is that possibly if a website's too much for you these days, you should at least have social media. So typically, what platforms would you advise business owners go on?
I mean, the default is LinkedIn, because a lot of the clients we work with are business to business, and that's where those communities are exchanging information, and it remains a pretty professional platform. There are noises of late that actually it's becoming a little bit too informal and people are bringing too much about their personal life into it. But I still think in the most part it's mainly professional. On the other hand, it's important to also realise that Facebook has a role to play, because it's targeting people who probably profile well against your target audience, and it just happens that you're communicating with them in a social environment, and they'll have jobs as well. They'll have workplaces, they'll have budgets to spend. So Facebook can also be, which of course is aligned with Instagram, can also be a valuable medium to communicate through.
So I guess you're saying definitely Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And a key thing I've learnt over the years with social media is to actually focus on, and you mentioned it there, the word social. I think what would your advice be on the kind of content you should be putting out? Because it's funny how if you're just flogging your business all the time, people see straight through that. But I think the best engagement comes from the social aspect. So those insights into almost like behind the scenes of your business, meet the team features. If you've got staff working for you, it makes your business more relatable.
Yes.
Would you agree with that?
Yes, that, and doing things like this, sharing information and insights.
Yeah.
Obviously, you wouldn't want to do the entire discussion we're having, but you could take snippets from it and use it on social media. So like the top tips type approach.
Yeah.
And yeah, those rather cozier sort of staff insights, interesting. I think the other thing is, if you've got a slightly different view on a certain matter that's in your sector that relates to your sector. So, for instance, if suddenly we decided, well, we've got a viewpoint on not using X because of Elon Musk, then we might share some thoughts on that and see what sort of engagement we get with that.
Yeah.
We know that video engages very well on social media. People's faces engage very well on social media. So do pets, sadly.
I was going to say.
Which I think are probably... It's great, it's lovely that there's something lighter to share. And they do get genuinely higher levels of engagement. But is there really quality in that engagement, I would ask. So, it's tempting to do that sort of stuff. Better, I think, do something with a bit more cerebral, where perhaps you're I suppose, enticing people's thinking. Maybe you're being a bit, almost deliberately controversial.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's that thing of you don't want people to scroll through. So if your content's no good, next time people see you post something, they'll just scroll past it. So it's doing something that you hope your target customer will find interesting, and then will engage and share. Then there's this whole thing, Rob, about how often should you post? Because it seems to me in recent years it's like you can't post enough, keep posting. I've got a view on that. I read something just the other day that you should be posting 3 times a day. Not sure that's the right approach. What would your advice be on that?
I think it depends very much on the client, the sector they're in, the audience that they're targeting.
Yeah.
I think regular is one thing, because you want to keep front of mind. Frequency, the amount you do regularly, it really does depend on the client. We post probably 4 times a week.
Okay.
On 3 channels, and we email once every either week or fortnight. But there are obviously, I would say, things like consumer goods, where you're looking for more immediate, in the moment purchase decisions, knee-jerk. Then frequency is probably greater. Frequency is what you want. But if it's a more considered purchase, less frequency.
Okay, great. You touched on something there which I got on my list as another great tool to try and get more customers. You mentioned email, and a lot of people will think, oh, I've got to do telephone campaigns, or but another great tool potentially could be email campaigns, which I know you've done quite a lot of for Glued in the past, and you've helped other people do email campaigns. What's your take on how worthwhile they could be to business owners?
I think it's probably a slightly undervalued technique, partly because social media became so popular, particularly during COVID, and email marketing started to come back in after or during COVID a bit, because people were struggling to find ways to communicate, and that's just another way to communicate. But I certainly think it's got a role to play. For instance, we work regularly with a client of ours that designs and fits high-end kitchens, and they'll email probably once every month or other month to a fairly tight audience to keep their name front of mind. So when an architect or developer is thinking about how to complete a project or what kitchen to use in a given project, that it's their name that comes up.
Yeah.
So there's one example where it's used to simply create awareness. I have to be honest, that frustrates us a bit, because people will be clicking on that, on those emails, because there's some interest, and we would argue a click is a step down the road on the what we called AIDA journey, which is awareness, interest, desire, action. So the route from somebody not knowing you to actually making a sale, and that's the step from awareness to interest if they click.
Yeah.
And we believe that deserves a phone call. So you mentioned telemarketing. I would argue that's not a cold call. It's not telemarketing. It's somebody who's clicked on your email and showed some interest, and you're picking up the phone to say, should we have a conversation about this?
Yeah, I mean, for me, this seems to be a real minefield these days around the pressure to, if you're under pressure and you need more customers, email marketing, I think is great because, everyone is wedded to their inboxes these days. Downside, it can be, the modern equivalent of junk mail. But then the telephone approach as well can be quite valuable in following that up if you believe there's some interest there. But also, a lot of people don't have the confidence to do that. And also on top of that, businesses are really busy. I know if you're a business owner, you can feel like you're getting bombarded with sales calls. So you can get short shrift as well. So I think the trick there is, as you've just said, is be very targeted with those. I definitely recommend email campaigns, and we know that you can buy business data. If you are within a certain sector, you can go and buy a list in the UK of all those businesses who may be your target customers, and you can just do an email campaign and follow up. In your experience, people might then say, because I've had this, I did an email campaign, Brett, and it didn't work. And I think I have to explain to people, well, just doing an email campaign or a load of phone calls and it didn't work, it's very unlikely to, because you need to have a consistent approach of activity. And you might know the stats better than I do, but these days I think it's something like now it takes 12 points of contact for people to even to start to notice you. So it's really unlikely that if you do one round of emails, if you do one set of phone calls, if you do one post or something, you should manage your expectations. It's going to take a consistency of activity over a period of time before you'll start to reap the benefits. Would that be fair?
Absolutely fair, yeah. We recommend giving an email campaign at least 3 or 4 iterations before you've got an opportunity to have gathered enough data to work out, hang on, am I increasing engagement here? Can I see any patterns that I can develop? So what are the percentage of people that have opened the email? What are the percentage of people that have clicked on it?
Yeah.
Have I done any telephone calls to those clicks? What have those conversations have been like? You may not get a sale out of it, but what you will get is an idea of whether you're working towards a sale, and therefore is it worthwhile carrying on with this journey.
Well, I think that's an important point as well, because last time I heard a presentation on social media, a key point that stuck out for me is that of all the people you may contact with your marketing, are they even at a point where they're ready to buy? And it's something like 3%. If you're lucky, you'll just drop on them when they're actually interested and in the market to buy something. So for me, that backs up the point that people may be very interested in what you've got to offer, but just not right now. And therefore, you shouldn't ditch those. You should keep in touch with those. Just going back to the data point, because a lot of people might not know about this, would you be able to give an idea of, if you were looking to buy data, where you might go and get it from, and typically how much that costs for someone?
Okay. There are sharks out there still who will try and sell you data that they claim to be very high quality and really good value for money and thousands of names. I would avoid anybody that approaches you with an email like that, because one, it may not be up to quality, and 2, it may not have been gathered legally in terms of GDPR. So a reputable list provider, established, long history of providing it. We work with one, and we've worked with them for probably probably on and off for 10 years.
Well, let's give them a plug. Who would that be?
It's called Corp Data.
Corp Data.
Corp
Okay.
Data. And I think the important thing to realise about data is that it's being constantly updated,
Yeah.
by a reputable data provider, and therefore a portion of it will always be out of date because they can't update it all at once. It takes time to get around the data. So I think it's reasonable to expect around about 10% of the data is going to be off kilter. And yeah, you can buy data with named email addresses rather than info at and sales at. You can profile your data in much the same way as you profile your ideal client: demographics, sector, job role, job responsibility, postcodes, and all of that sort of thing. I don't know, probably 300 quid per 1,000 names is what you're looking at. And the ideal thing, I think, is once you've specced up your data, so it's one, you've got the quantity that's going to generate the sort of leads that you want, because you can use the metrics we spoke about before to help understand that. And it looks like the right quality. Get some sample data, ask for some sample data, and have a look at that and check it looks like it's the right sort of people. So that's where we're at on data, I think.